Massively multiplayer, meaning an online video game with a large number of players to interact with in the same online game world. Many of the fun that's found within an MMO is reliant on other players. Large swaths of content could be literally uncompletable by someone attempting to play an MMO solo. So what about the MMOs that don't have many or any players? How bad does a game have to be to have literally no other players online? And if no one else is playing, why are the servers even still running? Well, I'm not sure that I can answer all of those questions, but one thing we can do is find these games. These long-forgotten, forlorn worlds are actually quite plentiful and all over the internet. Since starting the series, the amount of dead MMOs I've learned about or found just continues to increase. So today, we're gonna dive into some of those dead games and explore them for ourselves. And we're gonna see if we can't find something unique, something interesting, and potentially something even kind of good. Also, today's video is sponsored by War Thunder, but we'll get into more on that later. Alright, so the first game up today was mentioned to me in passing by a friend, Angeldust. According to Steam, it was released in 2019. It has over 1,400 reviews, which is actually quite a lot. It appears to have a Minecraft-like art style and claims that you can unleash your imagination by crafting beautiful buildings. Alright, let's give it a shot. I chose English as that's the only language my uncultured ass can speak. And afterwards, the game asked me if I wanted a cartoon or 3D visual style. You can sort of see the graphical difference in the background when you hovered over one of these options. The cartoony one actually looked a bit better to me, but I wanted to really push this game to its limits, so I decided to test out the unparalleled and unmatched fidelity that surely only the 3D version of Angeldust could actually provide. It appears here you can actually already pick your class, which is gender-locked, by the way. There's a builder, a ranger, a warrior, and a mage. Here I also realized that I had to actually first register for the game, so after a few moments, and with my account properly created, I decided to play as a ranger. You're immediately dropped into the world, seriously, no loading screen whatsoever. It's actually kind of impressive. And the very first thing that I noticed is the insanely high mouse sensitivity. Seriously, I was hardly moving my mouse and my character was doing 900s like Tony Hawk in his prime. I looked through some of the menus and found a high DPI setting that seemed to change literally nothing. And after a few minutes of messing with my mouse's physical settings in real life, I was able to get it to a somewhat controllable state. Now, essentially in Angeldust, you spawn next to a plot, in what seems to be a complete courtyard of plots. I'm assuming other characters and players could build in these locations, if there were actually other people playing the game, but you're equipped with a shovel, which you can use to dig up these wooden blocks. Listen, I also thought it was dirt, but no, it's apparently wood. And underneath the wooden blocks appears to be water? Either way, I dug up a fair chunk of my plot and decided to see what the actual building felt like. Now, when you place a block in a game like Minecraft, it places a perfect square of the block that you have in your inventory. Not in Angeldust, though. No, instead it places an uneven pile of whatever you have. I was hoping to make a little wooden hut, but instead I made a little wooden pile. Okay, we're off to a great start. Now, beside literally every single plot, and basically located in every single notable location over and over, is this NPC named Assist Anna. Guess what? She's an assistant which you can chat with. Now, this is actually the first time I've encountered a game that utilizes a sort of ChatGPT AI program to actually have their NPCs speak. I figured we would start seeing this fairly soon, but I definitely didn't think the first time I would experience this phenomenon would happen in a failed Minecraft MMO crossover. I decided to test the limits of this artificial intelligence and asked a basic arithmetic question. What is 2 plus 2? Apparently she had no answer, but she said she learns quickly and that I should ask her again later. Well, that's disappointing, but either way, I then asked if she knows what ChatGPT is. She replied, "Yo, if you can get them here, we'll do an epic rap battle." What is this? Anyways, I decided to leave my plot of land and venture out into the world. There were some floating coins which I picked up and my character was extremely excited about this. Next, I saw a horse and I just started blasting. My crossbow shot faster than some fully automatic weapons of the modern world, and damn, this horse has the single worst hitbox I've ever seen in any game ever. For about every 10 correctly aimed crossbow bolts, the horse would only actually get hit by 1. I think I now fully understand why the game was named Angeldust, because at this point it felt like I was taking a powerful deliriant, just trying to wrap my head around what the hell was actually going on. After a full minute of chasing this demonic-sounding horse around the forest, I finally managed to get him down. Once again, my ranger was altogether way too excited. It seems like every time you kill an enemy for the first time, you basically get a bonus amount of gold coins. Also, I got myself to level 2. I took a quick look at the world map, hoping to better orient myself, and actually just became much more confused. So I closed it and decided to try and kill this spider, which thankfully had a much better designed hitbox, and I was able to take it down in about 3 seconds. Now, one thing to note, you might be under the impression that because I already found and defeated a horse, that would mean I wouldn't have to defeat any more horses in the area. But no, there's actually only like 4 or 5 different models for all of the mobs in this area. The only thing that really changes is their colors. So there's different colored spiders, horses, birds, and frogs, and you have to find and defeat every color. I traveled to the top of a mountain and jumped off to test if there was any fall damage. Apparently not, as you kinda just float or drift down to the ground. Have you ever had one of those dreams where you're trying to do something like get up or run away, but no matter how hard you try, you just can't seem to do it normally? Like everything is kind of moving in a different dimension of time and space where up is down and left is right? That's kind of what it felt like playing Angeldust so far. Anyways, I came across another area full of empty plots that players could use. Keep in mind, this is not the same area that I had been in earlier. It seems like the game is sort of set up to house a ton of players, and while it's a cool idea and concept, it does require a player base. So I played around for a little while longer. I found a third-person mode, which I thought would help orient me and the insane mouse sensitivity a little bit better, but due to the camera always lagging behind your character's movements, it actually just gave me a bit of motion sickness. And eventually I found the shop where you can actually use your gold coins to buy weapons, consumables, utility items, as well as blocks that you can actually build with. I decided to buy myself the Venom Wash Bow, which apparently would apply venom to my target, dealing a bit of damage over time. But all in all, I think I've seen enough of Angeldust. A super unique game, to say the least, with tons of concepts that aren't necessarily original, but laid out in this manner is definitely a unique take on the sort of building/grinding MMO. My main problem with Angeldust is the execution. It feels super janky from movement to hitboxes to actually building. Nothing about the game felt smooth. I'm gonna go ahead and give Angeldust a D+. The idea is there, but the game and its players are not. Now, before we get into the next game, I want to take a quick moment to talk about today's sponsor. As mentioned, today's video is sponsored by none other than War Thunder, the most extensive vehicle combat game ever made. Now available for free on PC and consoles. You can take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships ranging from the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. War Thunder is completely immersive with detailed and realistic vehicles, top-notch graphics, and authentic sound designs that places you right in control of the most powerful war machines. Join a massive community of over 70 million players in intense PvP battles. There's simply no reason not to, because there is no game better suited for fans of military history. So play War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by using my link in the pinned comment or the video description to sign up. New players and those who haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's available for a limited time only, so don't miss it. So this next game is a bit of an interesting one. In my searches across the internet for old and interesting MMOs, I sometimes stumble across some really dead games. So let me introduce you to Salem, not to be confused with Town of Salem, just Salem. You can download and play this game directly from its website, Salem the Game, and as far as I can tell, the game was actually released somewhere between 12 and 13 years ago. And the official subreddit has a whopping 25 members, with posts dating from 7 to 13 years ago. How is this game still up and running? I don't know. So what is it? Well, it's a hardcore permadeath PvP survival sandbox game. Yes, you heard that right. It's basically the outdated version of Albion Online, but a little bit more hardcore. Let's check it out. So there were some technical difficulties trying to get this game oriented properly for OBS, but I managed to create an alien. You spawn in as a featureless gray humanoid-ish 3D model. I thought maybe this is a bug and my character was still loading, but no. That's how you spawn into the game. You're told to talk to the man or the woman to choose your gender. And voila, By choosing my gender, I was transformed into this guy. Okay, well, hey, I can't say it's not a unique form of character customization. These days, it's all about sliders and 400 color variations and hairstyles. But you can't just discredit the gray, featureless model speaks to a man to become boy strategy, okay? Now, my character still looked rather interesting, a little depressed, probably lacking certain nutrients. I wouldn't call this a healthy person by any means. Perhaps this is a rehabilitation center simulator. I really had no idea what to expect from this game moving forward. The UI was super interesting. You have what appeared to be an inventory in the bottom right corner, but it's actually slots for different buttons and menus. There's a minimap in the top right and a few different meters up top separated by a happy and sad face. The game kept telling me I had to open up the nearby gate, but it wasn't really working. Also, I then found out how to zoom out. You can zoom out extremely far, which helped me to get a bit of a better grasp about where I was. And that's when I realized I was clicking on the wrong gate. No, don't click the big obvious gate right in front of you, click on the small hidden gray one in the corner. Once out of the gate, you can further customize your look and appearance by clicking on the barber. He gives you a new haircut, and by clicking on the bucket of dye, you can change your hair's color. When I was finally happy with my appearance, I went to the captain where you can name yourself, and you're set off on a boat, which takes you to the tutorial of the game. Now, the game is actually voice acted, which surprised me. It wasn't the most high quality voice acting I've ever heard, but it also wasn't the worst. And that's saying something. After taking the ship to a small island, you meet Chief Lendahand, who's going to teach you about the game. Now, surprisingly, this game is actually fairly complex, with tons of different systems and crafting and skills that can be learned and developed as you adventure. The game actually does very little to teach you about these things beyond the very basics, and as a brand new player, it was exceptionally confusing, even trying to figure out how to do the most basic of things. First, the game had me forage some hickory nuts from a tree. By right-clicking certain things, you can gather or harvest them differently, depending on the tools or the means you might have available. Afterwards, I was supposed to feed these hickory nuts to a nubs, and let me tell you, figuring out how to do that was quite the process. My next task was to find and give the nubs a tumbleweed, which apparently taught me the skill, childish things. I'm gonna be honest, I've never been more initially confused by a video game than Salem. I literally had no clue what was happening, but I was determined to figure it out at least a little bit. I was directed to my character's skills page, where you can see many different types of subjects. You can learn the skills on the right by gaining a certain amount of experience in the subjects on the left. You gain experience by gathering or creating items, which you can then right-click to study in order to gain experience. However, by studying the item, it also disappears. You also constantly need to be aware of those 4 meters on the top of the user interface. Those indicate phlegm, blood, yellow bile, and black bile. No, I'm serious. You have to keep these meters up by eating or drinking. Are you confused yet? Good. Anyway, by gathering and crafting items, I was finally able to learn the next skill and move on with the tutorial. Afterwards, I was told I had to build a drying rack. See, when you learn certain skills, you open up more menus with more options of things that you can craft and build. It took me, admittedly, about 5 minutes, but I eventually found where the drying rack was and managed to acquire enough sticks to actually build it. However, it then took me another 5 minutes to actually realize how building works. You see, this sign here indicates that I'm building something. The ingredients that pop up here need to literally be placed into the sign in order to start building. Next up, I had to cut a tree, which took a non-trivial amount of time to do. Like, it legitimately took about 3 IRL minutes to cut down this tree. Anyway, I spent the rest of my time on this tutorial island studying and learning more skills. When the game isn't loading properly, you'll often notice your character and some of the assets around turn completely white. Also, there is a completely black loading screen that pops up for a brief second every once in a while, but overall, the game functioned quite well, considering I don't think more than 5 people have been online at the same time since 2013. I finally finished the tutorial, and I was ready to move onto the main game. This is where PvP and permadeath are enabled. You're shown up to 3 different locations on the map for where your plot of land will be. I ended up choosing the 3rd location, and you're now on your own completely. You have a small wooden lean-to, and the game basically says, figure it out. So I went gathering for a while and decided to try and make a fire pit. I managed to place a ring of stones in a circle, but when attempting to actually fill it with wood, my character just dropped the wood on the ground, and I actually wasn't able to pick up those pieces of wood again. I was losing faith in figuring out how this game works, so I decided to just do some exploration. I really had no idea what I was supposed to work on next, so I decided I was just going to travel. Travel as far as I possibly can to see if I potentially run into another player, another plot, or see anything of interest. So off I went, traveling far, traveling wide, traveling through different biomes, different lands. I literally probably walked for 15 minutes straight, and in that time I saw nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. Listen, all in all, Salem is one of the most unique and interesting games I've played. The systems are deep and complex and confusing and hard to understand, and that's basically the entire game. I can't imagine learning all those skills and developing your character only to get wrecked by someone who actually understands the game, because you'd have to do it all over again. But because the game is completely empty and there's hardly anyone ever online, it really takes the risk of permadeath out of the game. Now it's sort of just a single-player sandbox RPG. I give Salem a C-. The ideas and complexity are interesting, but it's a little too unique. It's too niche for my personal taste. So, next up, we have an MMO that was actually released this year, just 5 months ago. Trimurti. I do remember hearing a bit about it, but I'm pretty sure they just completely failed to market this game as no one seemed to play much of it, even on release, and to this day it's just kind of dead. But the graphics look nice, and like most MMOs, it claims to let you relive the classic gameplay of an old-school MMO. Seriously, why is that the new marketing tactic that seemingly every new game is adopting? Anyway, let's check it out. So initially, the game's graphics were looking fairly well polished. That is, until I saw the character model, which appeared to be graphically from a completely different game. There are, once again, 4 different playable classes: warrior, assassin, monk, and wizard. I decided to be a wizard. Unfortunately, though, I thought the male wizard looked a little strange, so I decided to go with the female. Also, it gave me the excuse to use this amazing username that I've been thinking about. Anyway, into the game, you're introduced to a small town, Mandara, and a fairly clean-looking user interface. A 6-button action bar, health and man on the top left, minimap on the top right, and some menus down in the bottom right corner. I was told to talk to the priest in the temple to the north, but first I decided to check out some of the menus. First, I brought up my character stat sheet, or player parameters, and wow, it literally looks like I made this menu in Microsoft Paint on our old family computer in 2007. I decided to look at some of the other interfaces, like the collectible items tab, which was absolutely no better. The skills tab was slightly better because it had pictures, but take a look at this quest tracker. That is truly beautifully designed. Oh, but first check out the jumping animation, the absolute follow through with both hands in the air like I'm about to belly flop on the ground in front of me. It's a sight to behold. Anyway, after a couple of dialogue quests, I was told to acquire some small horns from some creatures outside the village. The creatures you have to kill, thankfully, have a giant exclamation mark above their head, so you're never confused about what your objective is. I only had 1 spell at the moment, and it did a fair amount of damage, so these were pretty easy. The combat definitely doesn't feel good. It's also impossible to cancel a spell once you start casting it, and you loot by clicking on the loot directly or pressing F. But unfortunately, even after killing 3 of these guys, I still hadn't received any small horns. I then accidentally attacked a higher level mob, and because you can't cancel your spells, I died. But the game notified me that because I wasn't level 20, I wouldn't lose any prana points. Thank God. I respawned back in the village and made my way back to the quest objective. I had probably killed about 10 of them when I finally received my first small horn. Luckily, I got the second and third a little bit quicker. After handing that quest in, the game notified me that I had leveled up! And I was really beginning to hate the Comic Sans-esque font that they used for literally every piece of text in this game. But I was excited to begin my next quest, which had me gathering 3 more small horns, so back to it. Okay, surely, now that we've completed all this, we won't have to gather any more small horns, right? Oh, perfect! 3 low-quality horns. Luckily, the low-quality horns seem to have a much better drop rate. I got the first 2 almost instantly, or so I thought. Then it took me 20 more kills to get the last one. Listen, this game is not fun in any way, shape, or form. Usually I try and find the silver lining in a lot of the games in this series, but Trimurti was an utter and complete failure to me from beginning to end. Trimurti feels like the assistant AI from Angeldust tried to make its own MMO. The quests are completely unimaginative, the combat is complete garbage, the movement feels stupid, and jumping looks weird. The only good thing I was allowed to do in this game was name my character Waydot, and for that, I give Trimurti an F+. Oh, and real quick, if you guys enjoy these videos where I explore these dead MMOs, consider giving the video a like, and subscribe, it helps me out a lot. Alright, for the next game we have Stash. Apparently Stash features turn-based grid combat, custom housing, and a tabletop art style. When taking a look at the reviews, one player said they were literally the only player online for days. Okay, sounds interesting. Let's see for ourselves. Immediately going into character creation, you can select from a few different races. Human, Dryad, this one, Trolloc, is beefy, to say the least. You can also be a werewolf or a cat. The game also features 4 classes, which are Elementalist, Healer, Hunter, and Warrior. It's interesting the amount of games we've tried today that have 4 class options. Anyway, I had absolutely no choice but to choose the Trolloc because it was recently my birthday and no one got me any cake. I also chose to be a hunter because why not? Afterwards, you're asked which pose you would like your character to take, as well as the peg-based decor, which I guess is that circle your character stands on. So we're into the game. What am I looking at? You move by clicking where you want to go and your character just kind of slides over to the location. It's obviously meant to replicate a board game, but it kind of just feels super lazy. I found a world dungeon, but it wouldn't let me enter, so instead I decided to enter into battle with a porcupine. Rather, 3 porcupines and a fire spirit. This should be easy, right? Nope. I do almost no damage and they do lots. Luckily, there was a flee option, so I was able to get out of there. So, feeling completely confused as the game really gives you no direction, I found another dungeon. This one was sparkly, and I was able to actually enter this one. However, immediately I was greeted by an encounter with a voidling, which I wanted to avoid-ling. Because my health was super low, so I left that dungeon too. Alright, well the left side of the map wasn't faring too well for me, so I decided to try the other side. Apparently over here is my boo, or base of operations, as they say. This is where the magic happens. Basically, it's a player-owned house that your character doesn't actually enter. You can just kind of interact with some of the objects there. You have a storage for storing excess items, as well as a stall where apparently you can sell things to other players on some sort of marketplace, if there were other players. So I left my BOO and found another glittering substance. This appeared to be a resource or something I could gather. Maybe this will be the way I can start to sort of make some progress. Apparently that was just wishful thinking because instead the game just informed me that I didn't have the correct tool to actually gather this resource. I was actually beginning to get a little frustrated at this point. I really didn't understand how I was supposed to make any sort of progression in this game. Maybe it's meant to be played with a group of players? It seemed like every encounter had far too many enemies to be able to handle. I couldn't do anything in my base of operations, and I couldn't even gather resources that I found out in the world. There was really only one place left for me to still explore, and that was the giant city which I spawned outside of. So, inside the giant city we go. There appear to be some NPCs that are failing to load in, lots of merchants, some trainers, some machines for different sorts of systems that must exist within the game. I explored all around the city, going up multiple levels. Most of the houses and buildings were just for appearances, some had functions, but most didn't. I even made my way into the inn, which was strange. There were some items I could interact with, but nothing really did anything. All in all, I have no idea what to do in this game. It makes no sense to me how I'm supposed to progress. During the game's intro, a help screen had popped up and linked to a getting started guide made by some third-party player, but personally for me, if I can't figure out even the most basic aspects of a game on my own, then I'm pretty discouraged to continue playing. This was a bit of an opposite scenario to earlier in the video, Salem, where even though Salem was highly confusing, I was still able to make progress, and it felt like a puzzle that I always had the ability to solve. Stash, on the other hand, feels rather impossible, and like there's some piece of the puzzle missing, or a piece of information that I didn't have. Other reviews online seem to mention that it absolutely requires other players, or at least multiple characters, to be able to delve into the crafting systems, as you need people from other professions to progress. I really have nothing to complain about here, I just didn't get a chance to delve into the game. It felt more like exploring a long-lost world than actually playing or enjoying any part of it. I'll give it a D-. And finally, we're on to our last game of the day, Karos. Now, this game isn't as obscure as some of the others I've covered, and it does still have some remaining player base, though the vast majority of these players are Russian. This is a more classical MMO that was released in 2010 that features a more typical medieval fantasy RPG MMO style that we haven't seen much of today. I chose an American server in order to get that sweet ping, and was immediately brought into character creation. There are 7 different gender-locked classes, from Mystic to Bowmistress and even Cannoneer. I chose to be a swordsman and realized this game has very little customization beyond that. You can basically change your hair color and swap between 4 different faces. So there you have it, Waydot, the level 1 swordsman. Let's see what Karos is all about. My very first impression was, wait, is this Guild Wars 1? The graphical style is so similar. Even the font they used for everything and the user interface just immediately reminded me of the original Guild Wars. But the more I played, I was also reminded of Final Fantasy XI as well. It's like if Guild Wars and Final Fantasy XI loved each other very much and had a baby MMO and named it Karos. But then they sent it to a Russian boarding school for behavioral issues. Anyway, pretty standard intro. You're shown your abilities and given a fetch quest. I was already level 2 due to a daily check-in system. Now, while you're questing, you have a giant arrow above your character's head that will always show you where to go. It reminded me of the 2001 classic Simpsons game, Road Rage, where you always had Homer's hand pointing you in the right direction. Anyways, combat is also pretty standard. I one-shot a couple of spiders, and before I knew it, I was level 3. At every level, you get skill points, which you can use to upgrade your skills and learn new ones as well. Apparently, there was a spear in my inventory, which was actually better than my two-handed sword, so I switched to that instead. Afterwards, I was directed to slay some owl, bear, cubs, which I could also easily one-shot, and then I was directed to the city in order to meet Kilius. This is really when I realized that Karos is quite a bit more populated than the other games I was playing. As there were plenty of people milling around, almost everyone had Russian names, and the entire in-game chat was flooded with Russian. This is also when I noticed the purple ball in the top right corner, which I decided to click on and... oh. This is shameless. They literally have gachapon machines in-game. I thought we just called it a gacha game because they simulate those machines, but no, in Karos they just have the actual machines in the game. That's amazing. It looks like you need 2 coins and you can win some sorts of prizes. Taking a quick look, it seems like you can get mounts, cosmetics, certain keys, and some time-gated buffs. Anyways, I tried to inspect some of these other players in the area, and unfortunately they all had their stats and inspect options hidden. I don't know if this was for some specific reason, maybe it gives them a PvP advantage, but I did find it a little strange that I couldn't find one other player to actually inspect. Either way, I continued questing, which for the next little while was basically all dialogue quests. About 10 in a row of just talk to this person, then to this person, and then this person, which was a little tedious, especially when just beginning a game. You want to get into some combat and have a little bit more excitement. But finally, I was directed to leave the city and start venturing onward. This is when something strange sort of happened. As I was leaving the city, the ground in front of me started moving. Now, it's been well over 7 years since I last touched psychedelic drugs, but in that moment, I wasn't so sure. Every time you move back and forth in this spot right here, the ground in front of you moves. Anyway, at this point, I was level 6 and starting to actually get some new armor and weapons from some of the quests that I was completing. I killed some cubs, killed some hornboars, got some new boots and gloves. All in all, combat was actually pretty decent now that I was starting to fill up my action bar with more abilities. It had a little bit more diversity with some buffs to upkeep, a charge, and a powerful sort of main attack. I continued on doing fetch quest after fetch quest. Soon I was level 9, and eventually, after fighting a clay break, I was level 10. Which at this point you unlock your class development quest, which will allow you to niche down in a more specific class afterwards. But all in all, Karos felt like the most generic and standard MMO, and there's really nothing wrong with that. I had no real issues while playing. The progression makes sense, you understand what to do. It's like every MMO you've kind of ever played. You level up, get abilities, get to the endgame, and participate in PvE or PvP. The game graphically appears like a mix between Guild Wars 1 and FF11, and there's nothing wrong with that either, especially if you can appreciate the nostalgia some of those older graphics can have. The game actually played fairly well, and despite having literal gacha machines inside of the store, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a C+. Meaning it was actually the highest rated game of today. But that wasn't a very high standard, as today I had what might have been the most interesting or unique lineup of Dead MMOs so far. However, none of them really had that wow factor that I like to find in these older games. They were certainly entertaining either way. Thanks again to War Thunder, and don't forget to use my link to receive premium vehicles, the Vehicle Decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium. Anyway, folks, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, sub, even comment. Those things help a bunch, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider becoming a channel member. But anyways, I will catch you all in the next one. Later.